everybody. Welcome back to You Can't Win. This is episode 11, and today we are going to be talking about struggles with health and fitness and trying to get that going. So, how you doing, Donald?
I'm doing pretty good. How are you doing?
Doing good. Just had a delicious dinner. Love my chicken thighs.
Today I went to the gym, but then I went to KFC afterwards, and then had pizza for dinner. So I don't know, not a little bit of balance maybe. But,
gotta do the yin and the yang.
yeah. So that's what we're going to be talking about a bit today, and I've had problems with that in the last 10 or so years. Before that, I didn't really. I don't know. I was one of those people that I was like, for a while I was just kind of like skinny fat or something like that kind of thing. Like I was pretty thin. And then for a few years I started to get like a little bit kind of like put on a tiny bit of weight, but I didn't notice it at all because it was just such a new experience for me that I didn't really think of it at all kind of thing. And then I started taking medications and stuff and kind of became a vegetarian, it sounds like kind of irrelevant, but it's relevant because I was a bad vegetarian, so all I ate really was like pasta and cheese and stuff kind of thing. So
I think a lot of people do that. Yeah.
Yeah. So from like 2006 to 2007, I gained almost like 50 pounds or something like that just right away as soon as I started taking these medications and stuff, which is just, and I haven't been able to kind of shake it off since then. And there's been a lot of reasons why, but I mean, it's funny though, because in a lot of ways I'm eating a lot better now than I was. I'm still not eating healthy, but I'm eating a lot better than I was, like say a few years ago, when I wouldn't eat like properly at all. Like just day to day, one day I would eat almost nothing, then the next day I would eat too much and stuff. And I don't know, it's been kind of crazy like that, like just kind of process. And even in 2007, I remember in 2008, whatever, I joined the gym and I was like, okay, this is it. I'm going to go every day or something like that. So then I basically went, I sort of like geared up to it. And then I eventually was at the point where I was going and running at the gym in Montreal, basically every day going and running for quite a while, like actually getting really into it, sweating like crazy, and then over the month I lost 10 pounds.
Hey, that's good.
And this is the thing though, is that I had I wasn't talking to anyone about it. I wasn't like talking to, like say the staff or anything, or, I didn't really know what was supposed to happen.
You weren't really like informed about what you were doing.
So I looked at that and I go, 10 pounds, that's nothing. I haven't, and I just basically gave up for a while. And I was like, I screwed myself. I did all that work, didn't even lose all of it or something. I mean, I don't know. I had that really kind of, a very, very unhealthy idea of what was supposed to happen. And then I think it was like in the winter or something. And then maybe one day I hurt my leg a bit or something. Like there was some excuse. It wasn't just kind of like, I just gave up, but I was like, oh, that didn't work out. And then, so I don't know. It was kind of funny. Yeah. Over the last few years, I kind of had, like the last 10 years or so, I have like kind of swings where I'll join a gym and then go for a bit or something and then kind of give up or get too depressed to go or something like that. So, yeah. But I mean, I'm getting back into it now. And, I went twice this week already. And it's like, I don't know. It's better than nothing. And yeah. But I'm so out of shape at this point, though, that like, I can only go for like a very small amount of time on the bike or something, or I just start. I'm like my legs just basically like give out. They're just like, okay, that's enough kind of thing after like 10 minutes or something like that kind of thing. But it's a good start though. And I've started
You just got to start with where you are, That I mean. But you said you've been lifting too.
Just a tiny little weight kind of thing, yeah.
The little pink ones for the ladies.
Pretty much. I mean, it's pretty close to what it is, but I don't know. Yeah, it's like I don't know. People make the joke all the time, but it's like you have to work out to get to the point where you can actually work out, kind of thing. Like the pre-workout stage. But I don't know. It feels good though. It's amazing because it really does release all like the good brain chemicals, whatever. Like and
right.
Even if you do it like a little bit, it's like your body's like, thank you, please keep doing this kind of thing or something,
And it's funny how it gives you like more energy
Yeah.
You think it would make you tired, and I don't know about you and other people, but I always feel like, oh, I don't want to do this. I'm going to be tired, or I kind of feel tired already. Then it's just going to wipe me out. And then whenever I do it, I feel more energized afterwards. And
Yeah.
that doesn't like make sense to me, but
Sure.
it's definitely true.
Yeah, that's one of the hardest things to learn. I think that's just generally true in life too, is that um uh a lot of the time if you don't do something, it um you get this kind of like self-fulfilling kind of thing where you're like, well, if I didn't have enough energy, so I have to kind of rest for a while and then maybe I'll be able to do it another day or
Yeah.
something like that. And almost always it's the opposite, that like it you have to do things to gain energy kind of thing, so I think that's kind of a related kind of thing about like introversion and stuff, where that became kind of, it's so ingrained in our culture now, this idea of introversion, that you see like sort of like poisonous kind of extensions of that, where people are like, well, um, counting how much energy they have or stuff like that. And it's like, um, I don't think that that's how our brains sort of actually work. Like, I don't know if like, I think you do need like time to yourself and kind of time to sort of like recharge kind of thing. But I think it's mostly just kind of like physical energy and stuff, or like focus and stuff. It's not like, I don't know. There's a really dangerous kind of self-fulfilling kind of cyclical thing of spiral kind of thing, where you can isolate yourself and then uh, it kind of feeds into isolating more and more. So yeah,
Yeah, definitely. I don't really buy into the idea of like introverts, like people talk about
yeah,
extroverts and introverts. Like I don't think that's like a real thing. I
yeah,
think it's people are comfortable in different ways. I think introverts sort of don't like to be challenged and don't
yeah,
like to or I mean challenged in certain ways, and extroverts, I think they kind of I think in both cases, you're basically having people in their comfort zones, and they've identified, well, my comfort zone is this, and they just don't want to leave that, and that's just not good. You kind of need to
yeah,
get out of that comfort zone every now and again, and if it means like going to the gym or whatever, then that's what it is.
yeah. No, I know that. Yeah, that's uh, I mean, that's actually one thing that helped with my mental health a lot, was realizing that I didn't have to feel good to do something, kind of thing, or something like that kind of thing. Like,
Hmm.
I didn't have to get to the point where I had convinced myself it was like a good idea, and I had to kind of, for anything, like say trying to go back to school or something like that. Like, I had this idea that I had to kind of like stop having panic attacks and all that kind of stuff, and then I would kind of, and then once I had fixed it, I would kind of go then and start doing things again, kind of thing. And it's quite the opposite. Yeah, I think it's funny because I mean, they do things like, say, like exposure therapy, where they say like you kind of have to build up your kind of your defenses by putting yourself into kind of like situations, kind of like on an escalating basis.
Yeah,
But I think that sometimes that can stretch things out so long, like in some ways, like if you do it like kind of like in a limited way, you can kind of think to yourself, well, today I did something quite small, when it's actually like you need to kind of really jump into the situation sometimes and kind of like, scare yourself a bit, but like actually, I don't know. Yeah.
right. To
So,
make like actual significant progress, you need to move more than what's just comfortable.
yeah, I mean, the whole idea with exposure is you're supposed to make yourself uncomfortable, but um, I think that I've seen at least a lot in my own case or in other people's cases where um, the stakes are usually pretty low at the start, and then it's hard to actually escalate from there, because um, you're kind of uh, you're still in the same kind of mindset of um, being afraid of situations in that kind of way and stuff. So I don't
Yeah,
know. Yeah,
I
but
mean,
I
you're
mean,
sort of like normalized to something that's not good. That's why
yeah,
you would be in a therapy thing,
sure.
right?
And yeah, but I mean, at the same time, I mean, it's not like um, I still obviously avoid quite a lot day to day or something like that. So it's not like I fixed it, but it has gotten to the point where I can do, say, a podcast, even though I have social kind of anxiety and all that kind of stuff, and like I can do things. Like I got my master's and all that kind of stuff. So it's one of those things where I have to kind of go, oh yeah, well, I have been able to kind of manage it to this degree, I think, at least, So
Yeah, I
um,
used to have a lot of problems with anxiety and stuff too, and it
yeah,
just went away. Like, I mean, I really had to work on it for a while, but I didn't feel like I was getting better or whatever. I just felt like I had learned some ways to manage and to cope with certain
yeah,
situations, and then just I wasn't even paying attention to it, and then it wasn't there anymore, and now I feel like I'm like less anxious than the average person. Like you can put
okay,
me
yeah.
in like a really tense situation, and I'll be completely calm. You know.
Yeah, what was the timeline for that? Like, was it like over when you were younger, or was this over like the last 10 years or so?
Definitely like, middle school, high school, I was anxious, and probably more than average. But I think that was just like normal, young person stuff. But I do remember getting like claustrophobic in like assemblies, at school, stuff like
Yeah,
that, and getting really panicky around like situations with like just like social situations or whatever,
yeah,
like trying to be cool around cool kids or with girls or whatever, stuff like that.
yeah.
And then college, it was a little like I did sort of retreat into my own little hobbies and stuff a little bit. Like I was still doing all this kind of stuff, but made a little space for myself that was comfortable, and uh, and then kind of found friends who were like sort of similarly. I think they were just tuned the same way. They were sort of anxious about certain things like that, but they were not like totally socially dysfunctional and stuff. So basically, I guess like college, and then once I started to work, I think a lot of those I think there was a lot of like confrontations with like anxiety type of stuff that it kind of went away, and then I ended up doing things like going to Jordan and trying to just find a job in like a foreign country with nothing going on, that kind of
Yeah.
stuff. It just things that were so uh, there wasn't really room to be anxious. It's just like
Okay. Yeah.
you just got to make this work. Like you don't, you could sit around and be anxious, but that's not going to help you. You got to actually do it.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I think that just put me in a kind of like a like I don't know, taught me how not to panic.
Sure.
Which I think I kind of picked up along the way, but that kind of, or maybe those situations didn't teach me it, but that's where I really honed that ability to just be like that. Like that's just who I should be.
Yeah. Yeah. That's interesting because for me, um, like the onset for me was a bit later, like I guess like late high school, early university and stuff, but and then kind of got worse and worse. But the main thing for me was more kind of like not understanding what was going on, especially because I think I don't know. I mean, people had started talking about it a bit, but like it's not like now where I feel like it's almost everywhere. People are constantly talking about mental health compared to
Yeah.
how it was before. But um, like even in 2006, when I sort of had to kind of drop out of school for a few months and stuff, um, like the kind of discussions that I had with the department and stuff were basically like they had no idea what was going on, kind of thing. Like they didn't understand it at all, kind of thing. Like that was it really felt strange, but like they were just like I don't know. It just they didn't have any sort of like recognition of how mental health worked or anything. So, but anyways, that was a scary experience for me, like over that time, like not knowing what was going on. Um, and but I think once it really sinks in that like it's actually like an illness or something like that for like at that kind of scale, it does kind of help a bit because it's like oh like um, you have to like constantly teach and kind of catch yourself that like if you've got like the kind of like general anxiety or something where anything that happens you start to attach anxiety to it and then you start creating stories in your head about why it's like that and you really have to it's like deja vu or something like that you have to kind of catch yourself and you
Hmm.
go oh no this isn't real, this is just something that's you're kind of spinning out and yeah it's really so you know that's been one of the things with health and stuff, is that it really is like catching yourself and kind of then, um, like working through all the kind of like like the situation as you can, kind of thing. And yeah, it's just one of those things where it's, I don't know, I always feel like um sometimes I feel like, if like when I was talking to my therapist and stuff, that like they were almost like sending messages to the future, not like in a delusion, I mean like in kind of like, they were saying to me things that I wouldn't understand for years, kind of thing, or something like that, like there,
Yeah.
it's like I have to kind of like think back to like what they were saying and going, oh right, that's, that made sense, and so like they were teaching me things that I didn't sing it for years. And at the time, I mean, when you're kind of like very depressed, I think that like um you're so cynical and critical that like it just, nothing really sinks in. It just sounds like crazy to you that people would
Yeah.
not care about that, to the extent that you do or something, so I don't know. So I mean, that's the thing, is that I have to kind of I find that like even still though, like trying to have a schedule and trying to actually, make sure that I'm, say, exercising and eating right every day or something like that, is still beyond me. Like, what I mean, to get to that point. But it's like rationally I can go, oh no, but that's what I'll be doing maybe down the years or something like that. Like eventually I'll get there, but it's just has to keep on getting on top of things, kind of thing. So yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's tough for everybody though. Like that,
Yeah.
it's not something that everyone is just like, yeah, well, it's just normal. I just eat perfectly and I always work out, and
Yeah.
you know, people are people.
Hmm.
Um, it's funny, like listening to you talk about that stuff. I can relate to a lot of it, and I kind of remember having, those kind of experiences and the kind of self-talk and stuff that would get me through it. But it seems so far away from me now. It's
Yeah.
really hard to sort of bring those memories up and stuff. I don't think it's like repressed. I think it's just so
Yeah.
far from my current experience that it's hard to recall them properly.
Yeah. No, when I hear people talk like in the depths of depression or something like that, like if people, I don't know, message me or something like that and just talk about it or something they're going through or something, I always think like it's hard, because you think there's like this kind of built-in kind of flippant attitude that we kind of are trained to, I think, in some ways. Um, and then I also think there's almost like a mature attitude, which is kind of like better version of that, which is like you can just hear like in a depressed person's voice or something like that, like uh, the kind of like lack of relationship with the world in some way or something like that, right? Like they just,
Yeah.
there's just like a detachment, and then it ends up being kind of almost funny, because you're like, well, I know what you're going through, but it's just not true, kind of thing, or something, or like it's not like, what I mean, like, that it's they I don't know. And I don't know, I was saying this the other day as a kind of a joke or something, that like about like God's view of these kind of things, that if there was like certain personality or something that attributed to God, um that like if he saw all the horrible things that happened to everyone, and then does he have that kind of blasé attitude sometimes, like, towards people who are in really, really bad situations, but he knows of worse ones. So, so that like he's like, oh man, oh, your kid stepped on a landmine, did they? Hey, yeah, well, some people get the plague, or something like that, like I don't know. It's just kind of, I don't know. I think that's kind of, I think,
But
that's what
the
ends up
day of
happening.
judgment, he's showing you your
Yeah,
deeds, and he's like, "Yeah, you thought this was bad. Let me show you this guy
yeah,
over here." And you're
yeah,
just
yeah,
like,
yeah,
"Oh, you know what? All right,
yeah.
you got me."
Sure, and that's and I do think that's what happens as you kind of get more mature and stuff in some ways, is, or whatever, is that you kind of do get this kind of like view of things that you kind of experienced in the past, that you were like, oh my god, this is the most important thing ever, and then you're kind of like, yeah, well, strap in, because you got you got a lot of time left, and there's a lot of, what I mean, like it just kind of ends up being this kind of a I think that's part of it with anxiety and stuff too, is that um yeah, you do kind of get those lessons, kind of thing, where um I don't know, but in the moment it's so imminent and so like, in your face, that it's really hard to, you kind of have to sympathize with that kind of thing. So yeah.
Yeah, I mean, and of course, there's people who have had like, you know, horrible things happen to them, and that's, I think, a little bit different of a circumstance than what like we've gone through. Like
Yeah,
our thing is just I don't even know what it is, but for whatever reason, people in you know our modern society or whatever you want to call it, like we have kind of a lot of this sort of stuff crop up, and I don't think it. I think there's like a pretty significant difference between someone who has like PTSD and like
yeah,
trauma and all that kind of stuff, and people who just have this sort of like existential whatever stuff.
sure,
And thankfully, I think the second part you kind of just grow out of most of the time,
yeah,
like what seems to be our experiences. And so just so people don't get the wrong idea, like the former, PTSD trauma stuff, that's definitely a different
yeah,
thing that I don't think you just get over. You know what I mean?
sure. Yeah, and I mean, and for me, I mean, part of it is medication stuff, which
Right.
helped control some of the more kind of, the like, if I hadn't gotten, I don't think if I had gotten a treatment, I think I would have gotten a lot worse over time from myself. Like, I think that I mean, I think it would have, and I think that um, the fact that I'm pretty stable now and stuff, I do attribute most of that to kind of the drugs and therapy and stuff. So.
That's good.
Um, yeah, but so I mean, it's not like I'm not like I do think that like I should, I do think I should make clear that it's not like it's of an illness that you're going to have. It's probably like I'm glad that I don't have a lot of other things, but it still is to the thing where it could have turned pretty bad if things not had if I hadn't had
Right.
that kind of, especially I mean I always think how lucky I am to have kind of this um like the way that I kind of troll online all the time and kind of have the urge to just keep poking whatever. I have that same urge when it comes to like the bureaucratic side of things. So I always had that kind of instinct to kind of just keep bugging the health system and keep bugging the social welfare system and stuff to kind of figure out what my options were, figure out ways they could help me, figure out ways that I could kind of move along. If I didn't have that, I would be in a much worse position than I am now, like in a lot of ways, I think. And I always find that too with like I always say, like I have an economics degree. I know a lot about like policies and stuff, and I know, I also like, I've read like say stuff about law or something like that too. So it's not like, um, and I still have a very, very difficult time understanding the rules that apply to me in the system and stuff. So it's like, you know what I mean? Like, how are people supposed to manage these things? I think it's one of those things I think about a lot. So, um, you know, so
Yeah. Um, yeah, I don't know.
yeah,
Just hearing you say that you like to troll, or not in so many words, but that you like to troll like the bureaucracy and stuff, or like
yeah,
poke and prod at it. I don't know. It sounds. I just started imagining, for whatever reason, you like going to the zoo and like, just agitating the animals in the zoo. I guess I feel that way about people that work in the bureaucracy. Like I feel bad
yeah.
for them. They're just
Oh,
like,
really?
yeah, I don't know. It just seems like my idea of a bureaucracy is like that. Really, I don't know. When I think about that kind of stuff, I just imagine like like the movie Brazil or some sort of like Kafka
Oh,
style
yeah.
thing, and you just walking around harassing these poor people.
Well, I mean, no, I mean, it's one of those things where, it really is terrible, like having to navigate all that junk. Like, just it's terrible because
Yeah.
you constantly get being told no, and then I would say because about half of the people are just aggressively bad at it, kind of thing. Like just not good at their jobs and stuff, and don't want to be there, and whatever.
Right. Like they're
And then
hostile to you because they
yeah,
don't
yeah.
like their
Oh no.
job.
Oh, it's always hostile to me. Is like that's the thing. I wouldn't bother people. I don't. I mean, I'm so nice to them and stuff, but like, and then the other half, you always find people who are really good at their jobs and just kind of like make things happen. And you have to kind of like search around for those people. I mean, when I moved to Montreal again in about 2013 or 14, something like that. 2013, I guess, yeah. And so I got back into like the health system there, and went to like sort of like community health thing there. and was doing the intake appointment for uh, sort of like just getting back into therapy somehow or something like that. And because of where I lived, I got sent to like a downtown location, um, which the problem with that office, I mean, for this kind of thing, was that it was a lot of it was like homeless people or something like that, right? So it's like or like people involved with crime or something. And so
Mhm.
the so I went into the office one day, and they did have like my intake appointment with like a worker, and I like because of anxiety and stuff, and because of like all these kind of like mental things. Some of the problems I used to have were like I still do to some degree, but like skin picking and stuff. So that like my skin was bad, kind of thing, you know. And anyway, so he came in, and to be charitable to him, I think he thought that like I had been in a fight or something. So so he came in and sat down, and he kind of like wiggled in his chair as if he was being like manly or something, kind of thing, like kind of like big tough guy or something.
Manly wiggle, yeah.
And well, you know what I mean, though. Like,
Yeah, yeah,
like,
yeah, yeah.
yeah. And he looked at me up and kind of like sized me up, and he goes, "I know you, I know you. Tough guy, eh? Tough guy. You like getting in fights with people? You like, you're a tough guy." And he goes, "You like the ladies. You're a tough guy." And I was like,
Yeah, he got your number, Don.
yeah, yeah, yeah. I was like, no, like I'm gonna go home and
Uh,
read about Leninism or something. Like I don't know. And that's the kind of thing that like that's the kind of experience that you have with people that you're like, if you're not feeling well and stuff, people start doing stuff like that to you. Like, what are you supposed to think? You're just supposed to be like, the whole world's gone crazy or something. I don't know. I'm like
yeah,
the least threatening person I can think of, like, and then they kind of like think that you're some street criminal or something. I don't know. Yeah. So I don't
yeah.
know. It's
I,
it's silly, but yeah.
I was thinking like when I was going through my little like I don't even like to refer to it as like depression or whatever because like
Yeah.
I guess it was, but it just feels ridiculous to call it that compared to like the kind of stuff we were talking about.
Yeah.
But when I was having that kind of stuff, I had a lot of resentment towards my parents for basically ignoring my what was going on with me when I was young and like living with them and stuff,
Yeah.
and not taking me to doctors, and then because of that not getting on any kind of medication or stuff whatever that I that may have helped me and stuff. But now I'm very happy and glad that that didn't happen because
Yeah.
I think people uh, get into that way too easily, and then I think it kind of can become a crutch for people and stuff. And obviously, you're a good example of where that's been very helpful and necessary. But I think it's overprescribed, and
Yeah.
people sort of see it like like if you're not just totally happy and comfortable with everything that happens to you, and that you're just not like just overjoyed to wake up every day that there's something wrong and you need some kind of drugs or whatever, and it's just a
Sure.
little crazy. So
Yeah.
sometimes people just need like you just need to grow out of it. You need to kind of figure out how you're going to get by in the world, and that should be done with as little kind of you know drug intervention and stuff as possible. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I mean, it does. I think that does exist on like a continuum with like a lot of other things that are heavily promoted, like lifestyle kind of products, like like
Right.
uh, I don't know, like different herbs and kind of like diet supplements and kind of like there is like I mean just like yoga or whatever. Like there's huge industries now, which are kind of like you feel a bit off. Well, here's a way to fix it. That doesn't require any. I mean, it does. I mean, a lot of it does. Like say the exercise and stuff does require changes in your behavior, but a lot of it, a lot of it is like sort of like positioning yourself as a consumer and stuff, and like,
Right. A lot of it is
um,
a consumer thing of some kind, some
yeah,
some sort of product.
and that's kind of, and it tends to kind of very quickly kind of like, um, be a snob thing too, where if a person doesn't eat this certain type of food, then they're basically suicidal or something like that, like that in their mind kind of thing, like if, well,
Yeah,
you're
sure.
not eating organic food, therefore you must be, um, not really caring about yourself or your kids or something. And yeah, I think that's, so it's hard to kind of navigate that and separate it from like actual health problems or
Yeah.
actual kind of things that kind of, especially because at some level there's got to be an overlap where um, consumer and health actually does matter, kind of thing, like both of them, where like making certain choices are good, and um, but you don't want to like just fall into that trap of just being chasing after kind of these fixes that are sold to you, I guess, kind of thing. Yeah. So
Yeah, I like to think about, like, the gluten-free stuff that was like such a
yeah,
huge thing a few years ago.
yeah,
Just wonder, like, where did all these people go? When I was in Seattle at the time, so I think there was probably a higher proportion of, like, just ninnies getting into this stuff. But
yeah,
I felt like every other woman I met was gluten-free, like,
yeah.
had a gluten intolerance and stuff. And like, what happened to these people? Do they just like, how do you stop pretending that you're gluten? I mean, I understand there are some people that have this,
Yeah.
but there's obviously lots of people that were just in on this fad. Like, how does that trail off? I'm really I didn't get to watch that happen to anybody, but I'm really curious. Like, do you just decide, like, all right, that was a bunch of junk, and you give up, or
I
do you
don't
kind
know.
of quietly pretend like you never were interested in it, or how does that work?
I don't know. I feel like a lot of those people move on to um well, I think maybe they just have different problems in their lives later on, and then they kind of focus more on those maybe. You know
Yeah,
what I mean? Like it kind of drifts from something else to that. But it's funny because that's I always think about that about politics and stuff too as a reason why politics won't disappear even if a lot of basic kind of social problems end up being fixed. Um, and that's one reason why I think is that you're always going to have these people kind of finding causes to change society and stuff. And I think that like animal rights could easily become one of those. And a lot of other ones, you know what I mean? Like where it ends up being kind of like investing into this kind of, or any type of like diet related ones or anything else that like, um, I feel like there's always spheres of life where people can kind of decide to shift their attention. I'm not even saying like it might be true even like it might end up being right. Um, but it's like yeah, I think that's something that I'm always cautious about is in my head is that kind of like idea of um these kind of because right now it's a consumer movement, but you could obviously see it turning into a political movement in different ways and stuff too, right? Like where you have like you start to kind of like prohibit other people from doing what they want to do too, which it might be. I mean, again, I'm not even like a judgment call saying that like you could see like people saying like certain types of healthy food should be the only ones allowed or something like that and stuff like I don't know. I don't know. I think that that's what's going to happen in the future. So yeah,
hmm, that'd be interesting. I kind of would be okay with a lot of
yeah,
aspects of
yeah,
that. I think, like, like people are there's stuff like taxes on sugar, or like sugary drinks, things like that. Like, that's sort of heading in that direction, I guess. And I mean, I feel like if you want to limit people's intake of sugary drinks for health reasons, that the way to go about it isn't a consumer tax, but that the basic idea behind that is, I don't know. I don't have such a big problem with that. Like, I think it's a bad thing to have people have access to that so easily.
yeah. No, I like, and I do. It's one of those things where I do think like the whole food system needs to be overhauled in that way, but like in some way. Um, and it does seem. I mean, I said this on another one, but it does seem crazy to me in retrospect that um, I was just drinking like huge amounts of Coke, and there's no like I don't know. I guess it's even worse in terms of like alcohol stuff, right? Or like um, where I don't know. I just think that yeah, but um, it's more. I don't know. I was more interested in kind of like the underlying kind of like idea of um yeah, that like it I don't know because that's one of the big debates about um in socialist kind of theory, I guess, is that like that politics would kind of you can have a dictatorship that kind of flows all the way to communism because it's got one mission, and that's kind of like ending politics, basically, right? Like kind of like that's kind of like the theory,
Hmm.
and um, I think that's obviously nonsense. Like I just think it didn't turn out to be true,
Yeah,
and but there's got to be reasons why. It can't just be. You have to kind of like think through why is that the case and stuff, and then yeah. So I think that's one of the reasons why is that our conception of politics could just might maybe change if we don't worry as much about how whether or not people will survive or not. We just start thinking
sure.
about so
Yeah, I mean, in a similar way that it changed from like, like early modern history into or the early modern period into the current period. Like, what was considered politics is was very different from what we think of as politics today. Like, it just sort of was categorized differently. People had different concerns, and there was different sort of organizational principles or forms
hmm
that were at play there. I think the Giorgio Agamben's book. I know I've talked to you about this a lot, but I don't think I've mentioned it on the podcast yet. But The Kingdom and the Glory is
yeah
really good on that idea of the like the withering away of the state kind of thing and the end of history and all these sorts of ideas of like he really does I think does a cool job of showing one possibility that traces it through um, like Western Christian theology and then back through ancient Greek ideas and philosophy and stuff and he's not exactly blaming those things, but I think he's saying that our theology kind of comes out of that, and so there's
yeah
a lot of structural kind of frameworks that are built into that that have these problems when they become like the politics as we know them today.
yeah
Um, yeah, that's a really good book. I'd recommend it to anyone who's interested in that kind of stuff.
yeah. I don't actually own any of his books. I should get some of them, but
Yeah.
the reason I always thought that like he always seemed to be way beyond where I was in terms of like references and theory and stuff. Like I always thought I'd have to get through a lot more before I kind of understood that kind of stuff. But I don't know. Maybe I'll just dive into it and see what I like or not.
I think he's pretty pretentious and like he just throws a lot of like Latin and Italian and French and stuff
Okay.
just because.
Yeah.
And he uses all these really obscure references and stuff, but the ideas are like substantial and interesting. Like I think it can be difficult to read at times to understand what he's trying to get at, but a lot of times, like with a lot of these kinds of things that are like dense and difficult, it's not that the ideas are that difficult, it's just the guy is not communicating clearly. So
Okay. Yeah.
there's sort of like elusive, there's allusions to depth that isn't really there. Like if you get the idea that he's getting at, then you get it, and then you can kind of move on, and you don't
Sure.
need to figure out, oh, what does he mean with this like Schmidt quote that I can't read because it's in the original German? Like,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
whatever. You're not going to remember it 10 minutes later anyway. So
Yeah.
just get the whatever you're going to get from it and move on.
Sure. Um, he was in a movie. You know that or yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I've seen that little picture of him. It was
Yeah.
some like
I think it was the Flowers of. I think it might have been the Flowers of Saint Francis. It was one of those. Um.
yeah,
What do you call it? Religious. Um. Italian movies, whatever, like the neo-realist or something like that. I don't know what. I don't know if I'm thinking,
right.
but something like that. Yeah, back in the day, black and white and stuff. Yeah. So.
Yeah, I mean, he does a lot of stuff about uh, religious
Yeah.
issues in different ways. I've got one of his books about monks and like the lives of monks and the whole idea of like living by an order and stuff that I haven't gotten through yet, but it looks pretty good.
Yeah, that's cool. Actually, I was never interested in that kind of stuff, but I've started reading more about it. Like the kind of like lives of monks and stuff, and yeah, and I don't know, I find that kind of stuff interesting, and because there's someone that I know online. There's like a there's kind of like different sort of like ranks, I guess, kind of thing in the Catholic Church where lay people are allowed to kind of like affiliate to orders and stuff to kind of support them in different ways in prayer and kind of like giving money and stuff. And
Joining their Discord server.
pretty much, yeah, it's pretty close. But no, it's pretty cool. And I didn't know that Dorothy Day was, she is like the Catholic worker, like kind of
No, that's
radical
cool.
kind of. So anyway, uh, um, so I don't know. I was reading more about that kind of stuff. I think that's kind of cool. Like that kind of. Um, I'm like so far behind in kind of like reading and kind of like thinking through this kind of stuff that, but that's the kind of thing that I could see in the future, supporting in some way. It's like some sort of like lay association or something like that kind of thing.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think so. I think that's kind of interesting. But um, yeah, it's funny kind of reading some of the stuff about them. Um, I don't know. I think for most of my life, like people kind of like before, uh, say maybe the 1800s or something like that, just seemed completely alien to me.
Hmm.
Just completely. I had no understanding of how similar they were to us in a lot of ways, or like what they cared about. And that's been a really good experience, I think, in the last few years and stuff, is kind of humanizing people from other times more and stuff, and kind of understanding what they cared about and kind of like their interests and stuff and their perspectives and stuff. That's been really cool.
Yeah, I've had a similar experience. Also with like kind of coming to sympathize or just understand like more like conservative
Yeah.
people, I was always very like sort of liberal minded and stuff growing up, and then became more of a leftist. And I don't really consider myself any particular. I don't know. I think my ideas are kind of all over the place and stuff, and people have labeled me all kinds of different things. But I don't know. I just feel like I kind of get where people are coming from,
Yeah.
regardless of like that sort of initial layer of like cultural programming. You know what I mean?
Sure.
Um,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
I just wanted to recommend another book. Speaking about being able to relate to pre-modern people. Uh, the name is eluding me now, but Montaillou by, I think it's Carlo Ginzburg. Ginzburg with a Z. That's a really fantastic book about a village in 14th century France, and it was like the last holdout of the Cathars.
Hmm.
If you're familiar with that, uh, and what it is, it's a kind of like a micro history. I think it was one of the first micro history works, which is like an attempt to look at on a very small scale at some little thing in history. So in this case, it's just like what were the lives of people like in this village, and it is able to go into really extreme detail because the um, I think bishop or whatever, there was a guy who was appointed to that village as part of the Inquisition, who
Hmm.
later on became a pope.
Okay.
So all of the documentation and stuff that he took down from his interviews with everyone in the village are archived in the Vatican. So Ginsburg was able to get a hold of those and do this historical work for this book. And it's just really incredible because you learn about all these different individual people from this village, and you get to kind of hear what they thought about different things. They would just be asked
Yeah.
questions about what they think about just kind of like cosmological theological questions and how the universe works, and they got the opinions ran all over the place. There was this guy who would kind of be like a neckbeard atheist type today, and who thought that the spirit is just blood and everything is blood, and
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah.
so
Yeah.
I think sometimes people have this idea that everyone was just like very dogmatically close to the
Yeah.
church's teaches and all that kind of stuff. But in reality, I mean, people thought for themselves and just came up with stuff. Some of them
Yeah.
were able to read and read on their own, and oftentimes, like the that kind of like high theology stuff didn't make it down to that level.
Yeah.
The lay people were just kind of fending for themselves. And I'm not trying to rag on Christianity, because I think the same is true in the Muslim world and in other parts of the world too. So it's just interesting to see that kind of stuff. And
Sure.
yeah, so I would highly recommend that book. It's called Montayu.
Yeah, I think that's true throughout the history of the church too. Is that like there was always kind of people, like if you ever read the kind of like what the central authorities were thinking about things, it was almost always that the average person, like say they do like a study. I've heard someone told me once that they did like say they would send out kind of like missions, kind of like a poll, like almost like polling people, kind of like, you know what I mean? Like it was like they wanted, like they sent out a bunch of different priests and monks and stuff to kind of like figure out what was going on in the hinterlands and stuff, and kind of like a lot
Yeah.
of different cities.
Yeah.
And they got messages back that were basically like people believed all sorts of things.
Hmm.
And a lot of times also like local priests would like claim to have powers that they obviously didn't or something, like it was just basically like a free for all, kind of like a lot of places. And I think really it was probably like that in a lot of places for a lot of things, until print culture and that kind of stuff. Like they started being able to, and kind of like, very intensive trade and stuff, where I think that that made it a lot more kind of easier to kind of like iron out these differences and stuff. And I still think it's like that today, though, in a lot of ways. Especially, if you polled Americans about a lot of these things, even though that they have a high degree of participation compared to a lot of places, like I think that they would have a lot of opinions that, um, like say if you're a member of a mainline Protestant dominant denomination or something like that, or even a Catholic, whatever, like if you polled them on what they thought about, 100 different things for the church, I doubt that, they would get close to 100 on whether or not, the ones that actually fit with dogma or something, So,
Yeah.
um, and so that's a good way of, I think that's kind of interesting too, because it does kind of humanize in some ways and kind of like put in perspective a lot of the kind of like anger towards either Islam, kind of like all the people that constantly say things like it needs to be reformed and all that, and also like some of the stuff towards the Catholic Church as well, where it's like um, people saying, well, how can you believe that when the church believes something different and stuff like that or whatever. It does kind of put that in perspective a bit, because it's like, well, it's always been diverse. It's always been,
Right. Yeah.
you know,
That's the thing. I think that kind of coming to understand that about history really helps with is the sort of myths that we have about
yeah,
where we came from, like where
hmm
this society came from. It's always so like self-aggrandizing and stuff to make us feel like we're like the peak of human social evolution, and not just the kind of product of certain political choices that were made
yeah,
that aren't really
sure,
necessarily good or bad.
yeah,
So yeah, it's just I think that's kind of like I don't know, it feels good to kind of know those
yeah, yeah.
kind of things.
I started reading this book called The Catholic Enlightenment, and it's kind of interesting because um, the whole kind of point of like the kind of book and stuff is that there were a lot of people who during the early modern era, and kind of like as it kind of like rolled on, who like in the Age of Enlightenment kind of saw themselves as completely consistent with kind of like the kind of emerging kind of trends of like reason and science and all that kind of stuff being dominant in the kind of ideology and stuff. Kind of like saw themselves as being part of that, and he kind of opens up the book by kind of explaining that like um, a lot of the history that we have, especially in like English speaking world, um, assumes kind of like as a default a kind of march towards uh, if not atheism, then at least a kind of enlightened Protestant kind of, or deism or something, in philosophy over time. And that's kind of like so the Enlightenment is kind of like people coming to start to understand that that's what reality is or something, and
Hmm.
then so the history books are kind of written from that perspective of kind of like like uh, um, that Catholicism was always just because of the popes, especially in their kind of like what they were saying, was kind of very backward on that kind of stuff and kind of very hostile towards the Enlightenment and stuff. And then, so his kind of simple point is that, like, well, that's not really a good way to do history, is just to assume those things. He's like, you should kind of listen to the actual people on the ground. And there was a huge number of people, especially like even just, the philosophy and stuff like that, that actually were participating in these kind of movements and stuff that saw it as consistent with Catholicism. And so I thought that was kind of an interesting kind of take and kind of like an interesting kind of viewpoint that, because he was saying that like it would kind of be considered backwards in some sections of academia, at least, to kind of say that about Islam or something like that. You would, I mean, at least I would hope that people wouldn't say that Islam has always been backwards or something like that. Like people would say,
Wow.
no, they actually. Well, I know, it's pretty popular, but I'm just saying that like you would want people to say that it's had like a history of science and all that kind of stuff, right? And so he's kind of saying, well, that kind of work has to be done too with Catholicism and stuff. So, and kind of like get out of that kind of idea that these kind of movements and stuff weren't bouncing around there too. So, yeah.
I took a history of technology, it was a history of science and technology
Yeah.
course in college, and we did get into that a little bit actually.
Oh yeah.
We did get into Islamic stuff a bit, but he felt a little bit like, I'm not going to be able to do this justice. I'll do what I can, but here you go. And then we moved into medieval Europe, and he really did a good job of like trying to show that side of things. Like
Yeah.
we read about the like a way of like kind of looking at um, the way that knowledge was preserved in Europe after the collapse of the Roman Empire and stuff. People think about the Dark Ages and all that kind of stuff, but that's just because it wasn't there in the way that you would see it anyways. Like monks had these it was more like material knowledge. Like you would have like water mills and you'd have technology and stuff being developed,
Yeah.
and people would be able to think about scientific stuff and whatever all kinds of
Hmm.
different things in that sort of way, but it was decentralized. There wasn't a lot of sharing of ideas. There wasn't like this big sort of scientific discourse going on.
Yeah.
But that later that did come together, and a lot of that came together in the form of cathedrals. Like the cathedral is almost like the first sort of like, in a sense, like the university. I mean, for Europeans, like it was a place where people could go and see a lot of these different things on display and see them working in together to kind of like,
That's really interesting. Yeah.
so yeah, I think at least there's one guy out there doing it.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
uh,
I remember another course you took that was sort of related that was really interesting to me, as you talked a lot about, was technocracy. Was that the same course or
yeah,
was that a different one?
that was the same professor
Okay.
who I think he actually did military history
Okay.
primarily, but he was doing these for his undergrad guys. He did like, I think he was teaching military history to like ROTC kids and stuff like that, and then he was doing these more basic undergraduate courses that I thought were really interesting. But yeah, we did a course on technocracy and like the history of like utopian social movements in the early 20th century in America
Hmm.
specifically. So we did do a little bit of background research into like futurism in Italy and things like that. Uh, but yeah, we looked at technocracy, which was like a specific movement in the 20s and 30s in the United States to create like a like a technocracy, like
Yeah. Yeah.
governed by engineers and scientists and stuff, and then like completely, like it sounds like a dystopia to us today because we kind of see what that would sort of result in, but back in those days that was a very hopeful and optimistic kind of idea. We looked at Scientology as kind of something that was sort of in the same spirit as some of these movements. There was another guy who I can't think of his name now, but he had all these different inventions and stuff going on in the 60s, and he kind of had like, it was sort of like Scientology, like it was kind of like a scam cult kind of a thing.
Oh yeah, I
He
know
did a lot of world fairs and stuff. I can't think of the guy's name.
Buckminster Fuller. No, I don't know.
That's it. That's the
Oh
one.
really?
Yep. Yeah, Buckminster Fuller. Yeah. Yeah, all kinds of stuff like that. That was a really fun class.
That's cool. Yeah, no, I mean, I remember you sending me different kind of notes and stuff from it. I found it really interesting. So, yeah, yeah, I think that's I don't know, but yeah, that basic idea of kind of not being fooled into kind of thinking that um, we're kind of at the end of history and have got everything figured out, kind of thing. I think it's a good one, kind of thing. Yeah. So,
Yeah.
yeah,
So you think it's question time?
I think so. Yeah, we've been about 55 minutes, I think, so far. So we'll keep going. But yeah,
Cool. Yeah, we sort of wandered all over the place there, but
that's good though.
yeah, I think it's good. Let's see. Okay, how about this one? Nice and simple. Thoughts on Zizek?
Do you want to start with me? Yeah, it's up to you.
I could start. Yeah, sure. I was really big into Zizek when I was like self-identifying as like a leftist and really into that kind of stuff. He really helped me understand just how to kind of pull things apart a little bit. I think like how to kind of critique ideology and think about things in that way, and even the goofy stuff with movies and stuff. It sort of showed me that like you can do this with anything. I think that's the point of him doing that with like pop
Yeah.
culture and stuff. Like it kind of brings people in, it makes them interested. It's sort of like a crowd pleaser, but it also shows you that you don't need to look at like something that's really like smarty man kind of stuff. You can just, if you really know what you're talking about, you should be able to do this with anything. So I really do appreciate a lot of his work and a lot of his ideas and stuff. I disagree with him on quite a few things. I think he's kind of a Western chauvinist, and I wouldn't call him a racist exactly, but I think that I think it shows that the way he thinks about things politically, you sort of have to either commit to it and go ahead and say like, well, I do believe that the Western political project is a universal that everyone should adopt, and that everyone else is basically wrong, and that we got it right. And I think he has pretty much said exactly that in those that many words. So I disagree with that, and but besides that, I think he's cool. I haven't watched the debate with Peterson, but I guess he really like showed him up, and a lot of people, like a lot of Peterson fans, are now getting interested in Zizek and Marxism and stuff. So that's pretty cool.
Yeah, I mean, I have the same kind of basic thing where I read him a lot when I was just starting to kind of get into reading Marxism and stuff. And the thing that I liked about it was part of it was that all the dramatic reversals and that kind of stuff, and where you read something and you don't really know where he's going to go with it because he might set up something and then kind of demolish it in the next paragraph. That
Right.
kind of thing. I really like that kind of stuff. And I mean, the first kind of like proto tweeting kind of stuff I did was kind of mimicking that kind of dramatic reversal kind of stuff or something as a joke. Um, uh, and I mean, I think there's legitimate things of like why you would disagree with him as like a political person, or like as a, he said a lot of things that like over the years that like about different things, but like I don't know, the Roma people or whatever, and all those kind of stuff that like you're kind of like, oh, that's not good or whatever. But I don't know, I always find that like an odd way of thinking about someone. As it's like, I don't know, it's like I feel like I don't need to know if I like him as a person. Do you know what I mean? Like it's just, he's just a thinker,
Right.
and there's stuff that I can read and kind of go, yeah, I agree with. I don't need to know if I think like he is a moral, upstanding person on everything. I don't know. I think that's part of it, and I think some of the stuff that he got nailed on about political correctness and stuff, he has kind of leaned into a bit to kind of like cause controversy, but I think
Well,
his
I think he's
basic
trying to make
points.
a point
Yeah,
there too, you know.
but I no, 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 but I do think that, yeah, I do think that like he's right on a lot of that stuff,
Hmm.
and uh, I don't know. I mean, he is kind of one of those people that kind of like gets excited about fads kind of stuff, like, but at the same time, he's usually one of the best people to kind of like skewer them. So it's kind of, like there's certain things in like European politics and stuff he kind of jumps on, and as it's happening, and kind of supports, and then kind of falls away. And so he's very, very. That's one of the reasons why he's so such a huge success in that way, is that he can kind of, he's usually kind of near the center of a lot of these things that are going on, kind of thing. Like, like he'll go to Greece during the Greece kind of stuff and participate in that, and people kind of want him around. It's kind of like if Chomsky was more excited about doing appearances, kind of thing, in that way,
Yeah.
kind of thing. Like he kind of shows up, and but I think that's fine. And I don't know, but I mean, I did, and the more you read him, you kind of realize that he does repeat himself a lot, obviously, and kind of um does have a lot of things where he's just basically like the ideas that he have. If you've read the things that he kind of is referencing, they make those points in the original ones usually too, and stuff. And
Right.
but I mean, I don't know. It's like I always almost think sometimes that, like, if you make like a list of people in the world, like, would they be towards the top of the list or the bottom of the list of people you disagree with, or something like that?
Hmm.
Like it's like he's not the problem. I don't think. Like, I don't think that he's. I don't know, but he does get a lot of negative attention, I think, because he's got that celebrity status and stuff. So yeah. Anyways,
Yeah. Since I've been uh, name dropping books and stuff all episode, I guess I'll do another one. There's a book I really like about Zizek called Zizek's Ontology by Adrian Johnston. It's either
I think,
Johnson or Johnston.
yeah,
Uh, but that was really good. Like if you want to just read one thing that attempts to kind of put together a coherent picture of Zizek as like a philosopher, like his philosophical ideas. Now this was written before his big book on Hegel and all that stuff,
yeah,
and I read that before that one came out, and I haven't read the Hegel book or any of his more recent stuff. But I thought it was really good, and I'm not like the best reader of philosophy, so I was able
okay,
to make my way through it. So a lot of that stuff's kind of difficult for me, but that one made sense. So
cool.
okay, here's another one. Thoughts on Pynchon, Thomas Pynchon. Have you ever read any Thomas Pynchon?
No,
I have read most of his stuff, and I would call myself a fan. I guess he's really hit or miss for me. Gravity's Rainbow is like one of my favorite books. It's really funny, and it really represents like a war zone in a way that actually feels more like what a war zone would be like. Like it doesn't have like it seems really crazy and frenetic and like like human in a bad way, like human in a chaotic kind of way.
yeah,
And yeah, it's really good at doing that, I think. I also liked V, which was his first novel, and that's a little bit more kind of like toned down compared to like the wackiness of Gravity's Rainbow and his later stuff. But I thought it was really quite good. Um, Not a fan of Crying of Lot 49. For whatever reason, that just seemed really hollow and trite to me. And I also didn't like what's the one in Vice? Something Vice?
inherent.
Inherent Vice. Yeah. That not such a fan of that either. And then Mason and Dixon and Against the Day, I only kind of got through a little bit of, and before I decided it wasn't for me. So I guess I'm a fan of two of its books.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
But that said, I do really like him. I tried to imitate his writing style a lot when I was younger, just to see if I could,
Hmm.
and I think that was a really good exercise. I think I read that Hunter Thompson used to do that with the Bible and with Milton, that he
Oh yeah,
used to just like copy out passages, like pages and pages and pages, and then try to like imitate the style. And I tried to do that with Thompson, with Pynchon, a few other people, and that's a really good exercise, I think.
That's cool.
It kind of gets it out of your system, because you read someone that you like their style, and you start to imitate it even if you don't want to. So if you do it intentionally, I think you kind of get it out of your system, and then you can kind of like take what you actually should be taking from it and internalize it in a way that's just now it's you and it's not you just imitating them.
That's funny. Yeah, I like that.
Okay, Malcolm X and MLK were probably killed by people in league with the FBI, right?
Um, I don't know. It's one of those things where I don't need proof that the FBI is bad. Do you know what I mean? I think that's part of it to me. Do you know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like, I don't know. It's like one of those things where it's like almost like a gotcha for I don't know. It's like the culture's bad. Like the whole. Do you know what I mean? Like the whole climate of opinion that could create those situations is not good.
Yeah. There's a strange kind of impulse to try to find, like, to connect all bad things that happen to one group or one sort
Yeah,
of villainous entity or something.
yeah,
Uh, that being said, it's plausible.
yeah,
Could
yeah,
be. I don't know. It's not something I've cared to look into, to be honest. So,
yeah,
from what I understand, Malcolm X was taken out by Nation of Islam
yeah,
guys. So,
yeah,
I don't know.
yeah, and yeah. No, I know that, and that's it, but it's one of those things where I don't know. I guess it's because there's always such a focus on leaders,
Hmm.
and always this kind of like idea that if they weren't there, I mean, if they were there or something, then maybe things would have turned out completely differently. I'm not sure if that's actually true. I mean, it sounds good in some ways because it's like I don't know, but
I mean, I feel like it would have,
yeah. But I'm just
but
saying that, like,
but
yeah,
how exactly? It's hard to say, right?
yeah,
Um,
um,
it's really a shame that Malcolm was really getting a lot of things going right when he died.
yeah,
Like obviously Martin Luther King as well. But like Malcolm was like changing a lot at that time, so it's just a shame we didn't get to see what could have
yeah,
been there.
sure. Um, I know that's one of the things that shocked me once is that I've seen jokes about the idea that that Malcolm would have turned out um, bad and it would have like ruined everyone's kind of like opinion of him or something like that. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know. I've always seen that. I've seen that from a few different comedians and stuff like that. This idea that he would have been doing infomercials or something like that kind of thing, And I always think that kind of, you know what I mean? Like, it's like one of those things where it's like people, I don't know, almost like desire bad things to happen or something. I don't know. It's weird. Like, yeah. But I've
Yeah,
seen
I
that
have a
though. I've
hard
seen that.
I have a
Yeah.
hard time picturing that.
But that's the idea that it's like I don't know, like people always say about um I can't remember who I think it's Doug Stanhope that does a joke about I think it's John Lennon maybe or no Jimi Hendrix. He's like if Jimi Hendrix lived, he would be doing Super Bowl halftime shows with Elton John and stuff, and like it's just, I don't know,
Sure.
like and I don't know, it's those kind of like jokes that I don't know. That's the first thing that comes into my mind when I think of that though. When he gets about his shooting, is just this idea that um, that people say all the time that it would have turned out awful, which is just like a cynical thing to say, but it's one of those things where I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a little bit of a sort of performative gesture to kind of indicate like, oh, I'm not su such a dupe. I'm
Yeah,
too smart to fall for like something like that, because people don't want to be like the doofy guy with the Che Guevara shirt. You know what I mean?
yeah. No, and
Overly.
that was actually yeah. It's funny because uh, I don't know if I like say it a lot because it's one of those things where it just sounds stupid to say, but it was like Noam Chomsky lectures and Malcolm X speeches and stuff that were like two of the big things that made me interested in stuff early on, like in 2003, 2004 or something like that. Because just you know what I mean, like he just I don't know, like his speeches about like American imperialism or something like that. Just it's just like I don't know, it's so crazy compared to like say most other people you're speaking. Like he's got in the incredible oratory skills plus just really good insight kind of thing. You know what I mean? Like it was just kind of blew me away. But it is kind of one of those things where it sounds almost like cliche now to just say. I don't know. I mean,
Well, among like Muslim converts, Malcolm X is like, it seems like over 50% of people, when they have their conversion story and they talk about it, it's like, well, I read the autobiography of Malcolm X and
yeah,
then
yeah,
something something, and then I converted. Wasn't quite exactly the same thing
yeah,
for me, but that definitely didn't hurt. Like that, he's always been sort of someone I've looked to as like that's what like American Islam could
yeah.
be, Um, so yeah, he's kind of like, I don't know. I like him. I like Martin Luther King too, obviously.
Yeah, yeah.
Both, yeah.
Yeah.
Uh,
Okay.
should we move on?
Sure.
Okay. So the next one, I think I'll take this one to start with. Is Catholicism analogous to Shia Islam and Protestantism to Sunni Islam? I remember Midwestern trying to figure this out in my Catholic church back in 2004. I don't know if they mean a Midwesterner or something called Midwestern, if that's like a university or something. I don't know. But people often kind of use this trope of Shia Islam is like Catholicism because they have a centralized authority with the imams, and then I don't even know exactly how all that works, but then they have like someone who kind of comes after the imams or something. And
Hmm.
then Protestants are more like Sunnis because it's more decentralized and whatnot. I think that's that it's very misleading to think about things in that way. I think like that's just not a really that's not a helpful way to think about it.
Yeah.
Um, Sunni Islam being decentralized doesn't mean that it doesn't also have like institutional authorities and have a sort of idea of around what constitutes orthodoxy and all that kind of stuff. I would definitely say that it's less emphasized than in Christianity, I think. But I don't think that has anything to do with Protestantism or Catholicism. I think that probably has to do with like that there's political reasons for that. I think it may have been easier to maintain unity uh, like over a large population and a large geographical expanse in that time if you let people just kind of do their thing rather than trying to make sure everyone was on the same page. Like I think it was pretty easy to make sure, okay, are you guys all praying the same way? You guys are all doing this, you guys are all doing that. Okay. Good. As long as you don't say anything real crazy, we're all good. The Shia have a different kind of history where they're a minority. They're like 10-15% of the Muslim population, and more often than not, they've sort of been persecuted at times, marginalized. It really depends on the exact situation, and also in power at times as
Yeah.
well. Uh, but I think that when you are a minority and you have certain kind of you're distinct from the general population, it helps to have more of a centralized authority kind of, or like a kind of like keeping everyone in line, something keeping everyone in line. Whereas with the general population, it's kind of easier to just have a loose sort of thing going around. So, um, does that compare to like Protestantism and Catholicism? I really don't think so. I think there's a really different history going on there that has led to these kind of like institutional structures and stuff. And theologically, there's really no similarities to be made in that kind of
Yeah.
analogy. So
I think part of it too is like you have to kind of, I don't know, it's something that I've been thinking about more recently is kind of like what is true from the perspective of that religion. So like if I think that kind of really affects the question because
yeah,
if it's sociology, if that's all you're asking is like the sociology of religion and whether or not they have become these similar kind of institutional structures, you kind of have to relate it back to uh, how those things evolved and what was chance and what wasn't chance, and
Sure.
these kind of things. Like I mean, if you look at like Catholicism or something like that, like you can kind of historically look at it and say, well, there was all these different times it could have easily have like if say it wasn't like certain periods of like decolonization, or even now. I mean, like say in the 40s or something like that. Like say if there's some kind of thing made it so that D-Day never happened, and then Rome was captured by Germans or something. Like I mean, I don't know. Like there's all these different kind of and then by the Soviets or something, and Western Europe was mostly de-Christianized or something. What I mean? There's all these like, contingent things that could have happened where the Catholic Church could have been wiped out or pretty close to wiped out by events throughout history. Like all these different times of like, say, the Protestant Revolution could have spread more, or and even like when we were talking about the Shia Islam and stuff, I was thinking of things like when the Shia dominated empires were at their furthest extent or something like that. You have to kind of go, well, is it contingent that stayed that way, or is that is there some religious reason why everything kind of rolled back and Shia became more of a small minority again or something? You know what I mean? It's like one of those things where because that changes the question in a lot of ways, because you're like, well, is there something intrinsic to Catholicism that has this one structure that can be compared to Shia if the situation was reversed or something like that? You know what I mean? Like, it's just,
Yeah.
I don't know. It's just, there's so much going on, so many moving parts that to even make the comparison from one perspective of one religion, you kind of have to say, well, what is it that's being compared and stuff? I don't know. So, yeah.
Yeah, I think also because, like, I think the background idea here is that, oh, I don't really need to understand anything about Islam because I'll just take my like kindergartner's idea of what's going on with Christianity and just apply that to Islam and just figure out, okay, black turbans are those guys, white turbans are those guys. Okay, got it.
Mm-hmm.
And I think if you try to understand things that way, you're really misunderstanding everything.
Yeah.
Islam has a different political history than Western Christianity. There's a different relation between Islam and the state and Christianity and the state. There's a different relation between Catholicism and Protestantism and Sunnism and Shiism. So it's just, and there's no productive way to kind of look at it that way. You need to kind of take them all on their own terms and try to understand them if you're actually interested in doing that. If you're just interested in, feeling like you understand something a little bit, then, I guess you can kind of make up whatever sort of, what do you call this? Like, you can just make up whatever you want if that's the extent that you're interested in doing it. But if you actually want to understand these things a little better, I think it just takes, they're all unique, so you got to just treat them that way.
Yeah. And I mean, it's one of those things where I think, to be kind to the listener that asked, like, I think that it's that's often a person's entry point into thinking about these kind of things, is those kind of first questions and stuff that they heard from other people and stuff. So, I mean, it's good to start from somewhere, but it's just, I do think that that's what ends up happening, is that it ends up kind of,
I think this person wasn't genuinely asking. It seemed to me, I mean, maybe not. I'm not trying to insult anybody, but I do think that this person was like saying, like, this isn't right? Like, this seems silly. So that's my take. If it was a genuine question, I don't mean to be
sure. Okay, I get you.
Aggro and hostile about it. I'm not. I'm trying to go along with the tone that I read into the question there.
Sure.
Okay, so let's wrap it up here, I guess, with a nice quick question here. Do either of you carry a prayer book?
I do not generally, but I do have a few of them that I might I would carry maybe if I was going on a long trip or something like that.
Yeah, I don't have a prayer book. I actually don't even know if that's a thing that Muslims do. I'm sure it is, but I think we talked about this actually.
Yeah, we talked about something.
before.
Yeah, we talked about whether
But
we owned one or something. Yeah.
yeah, that there are like we call them dua, like supplications is how that's often translated, that we memorize, but I don't have like a book of those. And
Okay.
I guess there probably are lots of books that have that actually, now that I think about it. But I usually just Google stuff up, like I use Seeker's Hub. That's a website that has a lot of kind of reliable information that I trust for things like that, like, you know, for sickness or for whatever, that kind of stuff. And it's usually things that the Prophet did or that are from the Quran, and it's just it's nice to do the things that are like, you can make up your own things. You can kind of say whatever comes from your heart, but sometimes it's nice to use the words that are like, I don't know, that are just like the legit words, because you know you can kind of be clumsy and whatnot with your own wording. So it's nice to be like, okay, well, these are the words I say, and then I just put my intention behind it, and I don't need to worry about like my phrasing and saying this thing or that thing or whatever. You know that the words are fine. You don't have to worry about that. You can just kind of focus on the intention behind it, which is really, I think, the most important thing.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Well, it was good chat today.
All right. Yeah. Good chatting with you. Okay, guys. So go ahead and send us more questions as you think of them to at You Can't Win Pod. We got the Curious Cat running over there, and we are always looking for input and feedback from you guys. More questions. When this is up, there's going to be the Discord server that should be available to all of our Patreon patrons, whatever you guys are called, supporters, at the $5 tier, and that'll give you access to the Discord, which will mean that you will be able to hang out in there with everybody else, send in questions. We're definitely going to be prioritizing questions that people send in through the Discord, and we haven't quite figured out if this is technically possible yet, but I think it would be that we could have kind of like live kind of call-in type things from people in the Discord, that you would be able to join the recording and ask us questions live on the air and stuff. So yeah, if that seems interesting to you, go ahead and check out the Patreon, and yeah, we'll catch you next time. Thanks for listening.
Taskmaster burst the bionic zit splitter. Breakneck speeds, we drown 10 pints of bitter. We lean all day and some say they ain't productive. Could that depend upon the demon that you're stuck with? Cause right now, I see clearer than most. I sit here contented with this cheese on toast. I feel the pain of a third world famine. Said wait, we count them blessings and keep jamming. Tis him, scumbag, scum of the earth. His worth was nil until he gained the skill of tongues. From 15 years young, straight to my greyback self, I stay top shelf material. Jerk chicken, jerk fish, break away slave bliss. Generate G's and then be stashing with the Swiss. Fools can't see this. Under your pistols, a fist full of hip-hop duns. I progressing in the flesh. Esoteric quotes most frightening. Duppy took a hold of my hand while I was writing. Leg on me ting, Duppy leg on me an. I summon up the power of Banana Clan. Witness the fitness.